Sameach, everyone. Pesach begins with Shavuos. Pesach begins with Shavuos. On Shavuos we read about Bikurim. And that's the opening of the Haggadah. There's a fascinating description. We start with Shavuos and we move with our first fruits. We're so excited we have these first fruits. We put them in a special basket. We bring them to the Beis HaMikdash. We give them to the Kohen places them down right in front of the Mizbeach. And the man, the owner of these fruits, excitedly says, I am now telling over the story how I have come to this land. I've made it. And he starts with 4 psukim, 5 psukim, and he tells over the history of the Jewish people. And he starts by saying, Arami Oved Avi, the Aramean, perhaps Lavan, who tried to destroy my father, Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu ultimately ended up in Egypt. And then Hashem took us out of Egypt because there were problems there, and we came to Eretz Yisrael. He tells over the whole history of the Jewish people. The history of the Jewish people is laden with oppression, with difficulties, yearning for hundreds of years, and the man finally takes his first fruit that he produced from the land, the very land that was promised to Avraham Avinu. Years I've been crying and yearning for this. And finally, those first fruit, here they are. The first, let me bring them to the Beis HaMikdash. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I've made it. Comes Pesach, and the story in Pesach is the first 4 psukim of this short history lesson. We start with Arami Oved Avi. Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Stop, right over there. He brought us to this land, and here's the fruit. That is not told over on Pesach night. We stop right at the end of the story. As a matter of fact, the important part of the story. The only reason why the story is relevant is because you have the first fruit. You have those first fruit, you're so excited that this is what it was all worth. It was all for this purpose. And I want to tell over history, here it is. Going, take it, put it down. I have a whole history lesson to tell over. He brought us to this place. I did it. I came to this land. If you're not going to talk about the land, what are you doing telling over the history lesson? What value does it have? You know, I got out of Egypt and I didn't get anywhere. What are you saying if the punchline is missing? So there's a great analogy. One of my colleagues, one of the parents of the Yeshivat, is in the biotech world. Investments in medications, new medications, and this is the process. There are a number of phases. And you have to pass, according to the regulations, many phases. Each one that's successful is more and more exciting, gets you closer and closer to the end goal. And if you hit the last phase, it's tested in the hospitals with control experiments. You don't know. These people are getting the placebo, and these people are getting the real drug. You don't know who is getting the real one, who's getting the false one. And if the number, after they crunch all the data, after 6 to 12 months of studying actual human cases, you crunch the data and it's got to be above a certain number. You push the button, millions of dollars have now been invested. Investors are waiting. If they hit the number above the threshold for the regulations, they made it big. If it's below by 1 point, they lose all the investment. Back to the drawing board. And so, it's a really nerve-wracking process. You can imagine years of development, years of researchers and investors are waiting for that moment, and they press the button, and it's good. It's usually just a small team, the highest executive investors that are in the office at that moment, Maybe it's just the president, the head, all by his lonely self, and he presses that button, and then he tells everyone, open the champagne. Can you imagine the moment, that first time he pressed that button and it was good? He probably picked up the screen, disconnecting it from all the wires, started dancing around the room. I did it! I did it! This is it! And he makes his money, and he's so excited. And now he goes through this process a second time. And he's past phase 1, he's past phase 2 and 3, and he's now in the last phase of the process. He doesn't know. And at that moment, while he's in the last phase, he decides, the script that I wrote when it worked last time, you remember that script of how I started as a pauper on the streets, had nothing to my name, and I started with my first investor to believe in me, and I got my first researcher, and I went through the whole process, and I made it! I'm going to take out that script, and I want to review it and repeat it, even though I don't know if I'm going to ever hit that punchline with this medication. Bizarre. Absolutely bizarre. Why are you reading the script of what was relevant last time when you were dancing around the room and you made it? You're just shy of the punchline. You don't know if you're making it again. Why would you read that script? Just for extra inspiration? A hopeful approach? Oh, I hope I'm going to have that script again with that punchline, but I'm not going to actually say the punchline because it didn't happen yet. So we take the Bikurim story, but the end, the most important piece, didn't happen. And there's one thing that is so critical to understand this Pesach and every Pesach. We know when we got out of Mitzrayim, that punchline of making it in the most beautiful, optimal, ideological way will happen. We know definitively it will happen. So even though we made it to Eretz Yisrael once, and we were thrown out. L'dorei dorot, they knew we'd come back a second time. And after the second time, the Avos, we never lost our faith. They knew that they would come back again. And we have lived to see the fruition of those dreams, that belief that they knew the Pesach story would end with the punchline. We're still waiting for the last piece with the Beit HaMikdash, with HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence to be known in front and by all nations. Punchline is going to be written. On Pesach night, we lift not just one cup, but 4 toasts to the Ribono Shel Olam. We know it's going to happen. And we're excited for what will happen. And we're ready to storm the weather all the way until it does. Let's party with HaKadosh Baruch Hu over the fact that we have Hashem in our lives, over the fact that we will have Hashem, yearning and hoping, and at the same time possess that simcha that the Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael, with all of Am Yisrael, will celebrate the Chag, Pesach, the Carbon Pesach, B'yachad, Kol Am Yisrael, Chag Kasher V'Samech.
אני שמח בזה שאני משמח את השם. אני שמח בזה שאני משמח את השם. סוס עסיס בהשם, סוס עסיס בהשם, סוס עסיס בהשם, סוס עסיס בהשם. אני שמח בזה שאני משמח את השם. אני שמח בזה שאני משמח את השם.